This is our fourth IF talk, and I'm pleased to have David Gorman here, who I met quite a few months ago, and been really excited about getting him up here. So just a little bit before we get started, thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time to come out as well. The whole entire purpose of the IF talk is to essentially help the city of Frisco provide a good foundation for entrepreneurs as well as venture to come together and actually build something unique. So before I get started with David, I want to say also thanks to the University of North Texas, their Department of Innovation and Commercialization. They had actually provided some funds for this event. And also, our next event will be March 6th. And at that event, we'll actually have Capture Dimensions CEO Jordan Williams. Capture Dimensions, if you don't know, is a tech company that provides services to game developers as well as the film industry. So we're looking forward to having Jordan there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce David. David currently is a managing partner with Step 5 Capital. He was a founder of Clearview Staffing, which was based in the DFW area. Founded in 2000 and was sold in 2009 to API Healthcare. I'm leaving that really short because I want to let David actually describe a lot of that. So I'll let Dave give a bit of an intro, and then we'll sit down for some Q&A, and then after that, open it up to everybody else, with the exception of his friends that are here, because I know the hazing is going to start. So.
That's right. Yeah, so you guys just hold it down over there. But no, I want to thank you, John, for having me out, and I want to thank UNT as well as the city of Frisco as well. A lot of what's going on here right now is probably a learning process for me, and some of the things we talk about it, but I know that basically the idea is to bring out and support the entrepreneurial thing that's happening and to make that a vibrant thing. And so I'm happy to be a part of supporting that. I'm a UNT alumni, so that's something that is important to me. And so I'm happy to be out here with you guys. John mentioned a little bit about my background. I started a software company called Clearview Staffing Software in 2000. I had one other business partner in that venture with me. We bootstrapped it. We basically started it targeting healthcare staffing companies that staff nurses and doctors into hospitals. And so our software was an early SaaS-based product back in 2000 when web-based technology was fairly new. But over the course of almost 10 years, we grew it to about 400 clients or so. Healthcare staffing was about $12 billion at the time, and we had about 25% of that running through our system. So we had a pretty good little thing working. We sold it to API Healthcare in 2009, and since then I've just been learning how to invest in other technology and other early stage companies, and that has its own little learning curve. But anyway, I'm happy to be here and happy to share some of my thoughts with you guys tonight.
Excellent. All right. So the first question I have is pretty simple. How old were you when you started the company?
30.
So why did you decide to leave your job to go start a company?
Well, you know, I never thought about it as a young person, but I think I had kind of the entrepreneurial gene in me. My dad and all of his brothers were all business owners. They are very blue-collar, great guys. My dad was a butcher. A couple of my uncles were butchers. One of my uncles was an electrician, but they all owned their own businesses. And so as a kid growing up, I worked in those businesses and all of that, so I saw what they were doing and the jobs that they were taking on and performing and whatnot. But it really didn't occur to me until probably 10 years after I got out of college that, you know, the entrepreneurial path might be something that was right for me. I mean, I spent the first 10 years of my professional life in corporate America. I mean, my first job was with Waste Management selling garbage cans. And it's not sexy, but I got a great background in how to sell. And I went from that to healthcare, to selling healthcare orthopedic implants, and then eventually got into technology at GE, which kind of led me to technology and software and that sort of thing.
So what thought process did you go through in order to actually be able to, how should I say, come up with the right idea, identify the market, but more importantly, put together the team?
Yeah. Oh, so I should have said this beforehand. I live by mistakes. I mean, I truly do. And so a lot of the advice that I would give people is what you shouldn't do, right? But I think that's probably true for a lot of us. So when, about 1998, when I started talking with my soon-to-be partner, we started talking about business. Initially there were 5 of us talking. And that 5, over a course of a couple of years, whittled down to a couple of guys, me and John Pensack, my partner in the room. And the only thing we really knew was that we wanted to be in business together and that we wanted to build a software company. And John, I give John all the credit because he was the visionary at the time for, we got to do something with web-based software. That's where everything's headed. That's what we got to go and do. And so there wasn't really a formal thought process other than just that drive to want to do something on our own. And then really from there, it was getting out and talking with people that we knew, looking for ideas. I connected with another buddy of mine from college, who's a very successful entrepreneur on his own, and owned a nurse staffing company at the time. I said, Jeff, hey, look, this is what we're looking to do. We're looking to commercialize and do something with software. And to our great benefit, he gave us some great ideas for what we could go and do. And we cut him a great deal. We had a very good handshake agreement, and that was kind of the genesis of the thing. So, brass tacks, how did you fund the venture? Yeah, so we funded it with $30,000 of savings from mine, and then $30,000 from John. So we basically put $60,000 into the business to start it. And we ran the business out of our homes for the first year or two. And then we finally decided, hey, look, we think we've got something here. We probably need to hire some employees, so we need to go get some office space. And that was kind of the thing. When you began to grow, how did you actually develop the culture of the business? Well, okay, so culture was certainly not a forethought for us because it was 2 guys working from their homes. And so, culture was just like, what? But, I think as I thought about culture or think about culture, to me, it was the one thing I knew about John and I was we were very committed to each other in terms of holding each other accountable and figuring out how to build a good business, even though we didn't know what the heck we were doing. But we worked hard and we had fun. I mean, we were friends 10, 12 years before we started a business, so we knew all about having fun, right? I mean, it was like, boom, we got that covered. Boom, that's there. Put that aside. And so I think what became evident as we grew our employee base, people coming in knew that, hey, these guys are good guys. They don't take it too. They don't take things too heavy, but at the same time, we're going to work. And it's in a startup. I know a lot of you will appreciate this, but in a startup, it's early on. It's all hands on deck every day, right? And I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist at anything. So the generalist in me was very good at pivoting from sales to marketing to ops to figuring out how we're going to get someone trained and implemented. And so I think as we brought people in, them seeing that made a difference because they saw us as, hey, these are guys that have done and can do any role in the company, and they're not egotistical about it. And so it was, just a laid back but accountable kind of thing. So let's say from year 2 on, what was the biggest risk that you had to take? know, the biggest risk is, I think for us, we never took money in the deal, and so there was certainly risk in, are we not going to be able to grow fast enough? And we were able to mitigate that the entire course of our deal. But I think the risk early on in our business was we were selling a web-based technology. And initially, when we were selling our product, we were selling it to small companies, like $2 million to $5 million agencies. And they didn't know, a lot of them didn't know what web-based software was about, right? So when you were talking about, yeah, you don't have to host it, and you use it through an internet browser, and all you need is a broadband connection. All those things were like big risks for us early because no one understood it. So not only were we having to try and go deep and wide into a niche market, we were also having to educate the market on the technology, and so it created risk up front because from a selling perspective, you had to really kind of be on your game, I guess.
And how did the competition respond to your entry into the market?
So, early on, I was nervous about the competition because, we were going up against installed competitors, right? We were trying to get our product installed, and so, as all of you know, the incumbent always has a little bit of an edge. And so, early on, it was tough for the reasons I've mentioned before, but once we got motion, once we got traction, once we had those initial adopters, and we had people that were paying for our software, and we had a few logos where in a regional area, someone would go, oh, they're using your software, right? Then I would say that's where our traction really started to take off. And really, once that happened, we kind of just started dominating, quite frankly, because no one's technology could stand where ours was. Even, and our technology is old today, but then it was new and it was web-based, and we could deploy it in less than a week, and we could train, and we could have people fully stood up in just, literally a fraction of the time. And so once we got that market credibility, it really became a game changer for us on the competitive landscape.
So coming to the end of the company, what made you and your partner decide to exit the company? How did you decide that was the right time to do it, and API was the right company to sell it to?
Yeah, so for a long time I didn't think about it, and one of the things that I talk with people about is, look, if you're going to start a company, think about the end in mind a little bit, right? Start with the end in mind. Know what you want that thing to look like, because it can kind of put some bumper rails along the way to kind of keep you in line and hold you accountable and all that. And we certainly didn't do that. Again, check the box on what not to do. But we eventually got to that point, taking calls from people saying, hey, are you interested in taking some chips off the table? No, not really. We're interested in growing. And I think 10 years in, the question and the calls became more interesting. And if I'm being honest, the other piece of it was, as we had grown and taken on some of the very larger clients in the industry, they start to control you a little bit. And personally, this is like peel back the soul and open it up kind of thing. But I kind of felt like, we weren't innovating as much as we were back in the days when we were literally building our software for these mom and pops that got us there. And so the big companies and all the good revenue that comes with it, it lost a little bit of the excitement from an entrepreneurial perspective for me. I didn't feel like we were building and creating, and so I felt like for me it was okay. I'm good. Let's see if we can exit this thing and go do something else. And that's part of the impetus for that.
Excellent. Well, that's enough of my questions. I'm actually going to open this up to everybody here. And if anybody has a question. Yep.
Anybody that's a Kappa Sig cannot ask a question.
For your investment fund, what kind of startups are you looking to invest in?
Well, we typically focus on companies that are in the human capital space, because all but two of the guys that are in our investment group really are former operators, owner-operators of staffing companies or staffing technology. So we look for things that are in human capital, staffing technologies, recruitment technologies, things like that. It's stuff that we know. I mean, it's so hard to get into something outside of that and underwrite it and evaluate it and all of that. So that's really our focus.
I've known about capital companies a few years, but some of them are startup, some of them say they're mezzanine capital. Where does your company fit in, and how does one transition between one and the other when you're starting?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know that I'm an expert at the various, tranches of investment type companies and that sort of thing. What I can tell you is that we've invested in we like to invest in companies that are not pre-revenue. We like to invest in companies that are, $2 to $3 million in revenue, who have a pretty good, are coming close to break even, that sort of thing on burn rate. But does that help you out?
Yes, sir.
Bob, you can ask a question.
I didn't go to your school. I wasn't in your fraternity. So after you sold the company, what'd you do? How long did it take you to figure out?
I cried.
I heard that story. Tell them.
Yeah. So, so for me, I ran Clearview for 10 years. I loved it. It was awesome. Had great client relationships. Loved the impact that it made on employees and getting to see, when you have 50, 60, 70 employees that are reliant and working for you and working with you and growing and just all the things there's so much good from that, right? And then you sell it and it's no longer your baby and the thing changes, and it does, it changes. Not to say that all of it's bad, and it wasn't bad for me, it was just different. It was not my baby. So for me, when I left, it was kind of a soul search. What am I going to go do, and where am I going to reconnect? And I think what I do now is part of that, right? It fulfills a portion of that because it's entrepreneurial and you're dealing with folks who are maybe ahead of where you were years ago, and you can kind of hopefully provide some insight and expertise around some of the things that they're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, it truly. I think for me, it's a journey, right? It's a journey to, where you want to be and that sort of thing. And so I'm continuing to do entrepreneurial things outside of investments. And do I think I'll run another software company? I hope not. I have no interest in doing that again. But I love being an entrepreneur, and I love starting and operating businesses. It's just now I want to be involved in things where it's like I can see the light, or at least see the light's around the corner there, not too far, and not just a 10-year run into infinity. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing the story, and congratulations on the journey that you took, which resulted in a great success. I can relate to some of that because I've been through a couple of those experiences myself. In fact, I just switched into another startup at the beginning of the year. I was hoping to get some funding from you, or at least have a conversation with your funds, but we don't quite fit your profile of the revenue that you said were quite early. My question to you is, this is in healthcare, actually it's a software company, cloud-based, trying to solve the provider and the patient engagement. My question to you is, the landscape in healthcare since you started and where we are now has amazingly changed. Can you comment on, in the light of the current things like Apple, Google, Amazon, the Berkshires, everybody wants to be in healthcare and do something about it and fix it. They're saying it's broken. Can you share your thoughts on where you see healthcare going in the next 5 years in terms of technology?
I wish I could. I really do. I think I don't know a lot about what Berkshire and Amazon and Jamie Dimon what they're doing. I hope that they're doing something bold and brave, something that significantly moves the needle. Because I as a consumer of healthcare with young children, I think it's totally broke, and I think it's ridden with fraud and corruption, and I mean, just it's awful. I think it's a mess. So I wish I had a better view into where it's going. I would hope that something like what they're doing is meaningful, and exposing that healthcare shouldn't really cost as much as it does, right? So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
Hi there.
Hey there.
Quick question for you. I appreciate you sharing the information about growing to 400 clients at the peak. Can you talk about, as you grew, your scaling and how many folks you ultimately had working for you, and when you knew how to add headcount and what that looked like? That's kind of the first question, is headcount and growth. Second question is, did you have a J-curve phenomenon where there was some point along the path that you really hit something correctly and that allowed you to expand?
Well, look, I wouldn't classify anything we did necessarily as sophisticated. I mean, we were just operating a business, and I say this a lot. It's like we grew when we had cash to grow. We never, and I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It was just our approach. We never took on debt. I mean, we never even had a line of credit in the business, much less having sold equity. So we grew as we were making sales, and we added headcount when we had people coming to us saying, "Hey, we got to fix this. We got to move. We got to grow." And I think that our technology gave us a lot of scale that our competition didn't have, because it was web-based and because we could basically put it online, and I think that served us very well. I mean, for probably 90% of our sales and implementation, we never had to go out and see a client. We never had to go train them on site. We could do all that remotely. So from a cost savings perspective, it was very efficient. When we got into bigger enterprise sales, of course, we had to go get on plane and do the pitches and all that. And then eventually we were doing implementations on site. But I think we had good scale because of the technology. So does that kind of give you some
How many
perspective?
folks at the peak?
At the peak, we had, I think, 70 employees. And a good bit of those, most of those were engineers. You know, like I mentioned a moment ago, one of the things that made our product unique is that we went in very deep and wide into the space. And so even though healthcare was kind of this small niche market with only probably 4 or 5 players, we were able to go in and truly differentiate based on our ability to understand our clients, which early on was extremely tough because we didn't have healthcare staffing backgrounds, and we knew we were educating the market on web-based technology. So those made for some pretty interesting times early on. But once we were able to accomplish and solve some of those complex problems in their business, our hooks were really, really deep into their business. It was very hard for them to not that they, to turn off or whatever.
Did you have a J-curve ramp where you went for a period and all of a sudden you had a breakout?
I don't know what a J-curve is.
where you were hockey stick. Yeah, the hockey stick.
No, we didn't have
just
a hockey
sort of
stick.
Steady progression.
It was steady growth.
Okay.
Yeah, you could have said hockey stick. If I
So-
were more specialized in math or something, I probably would have known what a J-curve was.
I don't need a mic. During your growth projection, did you ever have any down years, any dips in there? And if you did, were you able to identify maybe what might have caused it, and did you do anything to correct it, or was it just slow, steady growth along the way?
It really was slow, steady growth along the way. I mean, of course, the percentage went down as we got, to 400 clients or whatever. But I mean, our number was we were pulling on anywhere from 45 to 60 new implementations a year in agencies. right? So by the end, that was a 10%, call it a 10% growth rate. So, and that's, it's an interesting deal because we debated often about, well, why wouldn't we just hire a bunch of salespeople and try to blow this thing up? But we never mastered hiring a sales force of 10. I mean, I think the biggest our sales force ever got was like 5 inside reps. And that was just kind of tapping it out for the market. Because at the end of the day, we had 400 clients, and there were probably 2,000 agencies. And there's, of course, been a lot of consolidation now, so I don't know what the number is now, but it's an interesting question to kind of go back and try to think about, could we have done more? But we pushed the button a few times, and it just we never could get to this, how do we hire 10 reps or whatever.
So thank you for being here, and right here.
Oh, yeah.
So my question is, as someone who has had a startup from beginning to exit, and the things you've learned there, now as an investor, what insight does that give you about the investment decisions you make? And then how can early stage startups do the right things to position themselves to be attractive for investment later on?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked that because it triggered a thought. Whenever I'm across the table from a founder or in a pitch meeting and I'm listening to someone trying to raise money, oftentimes I find myself asking, why are you raising money? I've seen a lot of founders that are very fixated on raising money, and I'm looking at them going, they're young. What do they have to lose right now? Get your ass out there and sell something, and then figure out if it makes sense to raise money. And so I really, and I'm very open about that. I mean, I would much rather, push someone down the path. In fact, if for any entrepreneur in here, I think if you want to do yourself a good cause, before you raise money, at least model out what an organic growth story would look like for you. And could you do it? Could you sustain it? Does it take a 5-year run and make it into a 10-year run, right? In terms of how I evaluate, obviously you look for good, smart people, people that complement each other, people that are capable of handling multiple things, wearing lots of hats. I think that's an important thing. Obviously, as you grow, you have to kind of move into a lane, and so people's ability to evolve in that regard. I think market timing is a really big thing. Not that you can time a market perfectly, but I just look at what we did. I don't know that we could do what we did today because technology moves so much faster today than it did 20 years ago when we were developing our technology. But back then, that slower pace, even though we were moving much faster, that slower pace allowed us to really broaden our technology, whereas today, companies would come in and they would just snap a bunch of pieces together and maybe do something similar, but for those individual pieces, have they created their own individual value? And again, you can look at Dropbox or something like that and go, well, heck yeah, they did, right? Because that's a great point solution. But for us, I think that going wide and deep helped us maximize our value. And so, did I give you a reasonable answer there, follow-up?
Yeah, so just real quick follow-up on
Sure.
that is, when you look at a company, do you expect that the leadership that comes to you for seeking investment is going to be the leadership that takes it to maturity, or do you expect that the leadership is going to change over time?
Yeah, look, I think from our perspective, and again, we're a group that's learning this along the way, right? So I look first and foremost as an operator, and so that's my lens. Is I look at the team and I ask, what kind of operator are they going to be? And a smarter money person may come in and go, well, I don't look at that. I want to look beyond that and see if this thing really has an opportunity to be 10 times as big, and then I want to look beyond to the next person that can come in and get into that place. I'm not really there. I'm more, is the entrepreneur right?
You're investing in the person,
Yeah.
in the idea.
Well, look, I think it's both. I mean, I kind of waffle bump back and forth on that, right? What's the right thing? Is it the product? Is it the market? Is it the people? And it's tough. I mean, you can have a great team fail because market timing was wrong, right? But you would also go, well, that same great team should be able to pivot. So there's lots of little nuance in all of that can kind of dictate whether you're going to ultimately fail or not. I mean, if you are targeting a market and that's all you're dialed in on and the timing's right, then you're kind of dead in the water. So I think it's being able to evaluate things differently, and I think it's different from person to person, from market to market, because you look for what would a pivot look like, as an example.
So can you share a little about when you decided it was time to implement your exit strategy, and what were the steps that led up to that?
Yeah, so, we, as you probably have gathered, I mean, we ran our business for a long time without a lot of heavy overhead in our business. So it was my partner, I had a head of marketing, I had a head of sales, didn't have a CFO. I mean, our finances were pretty straightforward, so we didn't, but a CFO is someone I eventually hired. Once I knew we were going to be out in the market, we also hired an advisor. We hired a company called Quorum out of Seattle. They're focused exclusively on software, so they understood our business really well. And, they really kind of guided us through their process, right? So coming in, understanding our business, talking with us about, who the players are in the market, who some potential acquirers might look like, putting together, all the documents that kind of go along with, feeding a story, a narrative out into the marketplace to try and drum up buyer interest. So that's a part of it. And once you have 3 or 4 companies, you kind of get into a process, and you're talking, and you get a letter of intent. And does that kind of help you out? Okay.
So I've got 2 more questions, and then we're going to move it out front.
Move it out front, cried the boss. All right, got it. Come on, Bob.
How about now? Okay. So most investment groups have certain parameters, and you've talked about the kind of space you invest in. What kind of checks are you guys writing, and what kind of support do you give? Because I know my son's doing a technology startup right now, and I was able to make an investment, but I'm dumb money because I don't have anything to offer them in terms of real knowledge or connections or anything else like that. So they're always looking for smart money.
Yeah.
So what size checks and what all do you provide?
So our biggest check so far is $1 million, a little over $1 million. And we've put as little as $250 in, and we typically at that level. I mean, it depends, because when we put that $1 million in, we actually led that round. And I think what we learned at the end of that process is we probably don't want to lead. We probably want to follow, because there are more, there are people that further down the path that have better resources to do the due diligence. And when you're 5 guys who are ex-owner operators, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work getting a deal across the table. And so, that's the size check we write. We probably more fall on the follow side of it nowadays. And I think for us, it's not really about having to have a seat. It's like for example, a seat on a board. It's if we can add value, what does that look like, right? And if it makes sense, we would. And we led that deal, but we actually deferred the board seat to a guy that had much better connections in the healthcare space than we do.
You mentioned that you don't necessarily have insights on what's going to happen in the future of healthcare. What about healthcare staffing? What do you think the future of healthcare staffing is? And what's the evolution of what you started in 2000 to when you left in 2010 to where you think it's headed?
Well, okay, so it's an interesting question, and I certainly don't have a crystal ball, right? What I can tell you is that even back when I was in the business and in the healthcare staffing, we had kind of these grand ideas of creating these web-based platforms where healthcare workers, whether those are contingent labor, full-time labor, are able to plug into the platform. And a lot of people kind of took that as you're going to do away with the agencies, with the staffing agencies. And I think that's where a lot of people are trying to take it today, right? Why do we need all these staffing agencies when we've got technology that a nurse can plug into from her home, go find jobs, go kind of self-credential, self-validate her credentials, and then self-staff almost. It's kind of that gig economy type concept working. And I think that eventually will take off more and more. I think the thing that people underestimate is a lot of the value that the agencies bring in terms of getting those people out the door, right? And I don't, and it probably sounds like I'm being critical, and I don't mean to sound critical, but the contingent workers, they want to be able to work their own lifestyle, right? And so a little hand-holding can go a long way, and I think that's a big part of why those agencies exist. It's not just about the credentialing and all the mechanical pieces of it. It's just about, hey, staying on that person and getting them out the door. And so whether or not technology can upend that, I don't know. But I think it's probably headed in that direction, but it's slow. That's been a conversation for 20 years now, and it still is there.
So we're going to have one last question, but we're going to move that out front. So with that, I want to say thank you to David, and thank everybody for being here. Appreciate it very much.